Katie Martinez stood in front of the big metal doors. Her hands were sweaty, and her heart was beating fast. The doors were 10 feet tall and made of silver metal that looked like it could stop a tank. Behind those doors was the most scary test. In the whole Galactic Military Academy. She was 19 years old and far from home. Earth was millions of miles away. Here on the Academy planet, everything was different. The sky was purple instead of blue. The grass was red instead of green. Even the air tasted strange in her mouth. Katie looked around at the other students waiting with her. There was a tall blue alien with 4 arms. His name was something she could not say and write. Next to him stood a rock-like creature that looked like it was made of gray stones. Its eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. Behind them, more alien students waited. Some had wings, others had tails. A few looked almost human, but had strange colored skin or too many fingers. Katie was the only real human in the group. That made her feel alone and scared. The academy was huge. It had been built by many different alien races working together. The buildings were made of materials Katie had never seen before. Some walls seemed to glow with their own light. Others looked like they were made of liquid metal that never stopped moving. Katie's grandmother had told her stories about this place. Grandma Betty had been one of the first humans to come here 50 years ago. Back then, most aliens thought humans were weak and stupid. They called Earth a death world because it was so dangerous compared to other planets. Katie, remember what I taught you? Her grandmother had said before Katie left Earth. Humans are different from aliens. We think different. We solve problems different. Do not try to be like them. Be human. Now Katie understood what her grandmother meant. The other students were all talking about the test in quiet voices. They spoke about following rules and being careful. They talked about studying the maps and learning the right way to do things. But Katie was thinking about something else. She was thinking about the walls. The test was called the maze. Everyone had to go through a big puzzle made of metal walls and doors. There were traps and locks and robot guards. The goal was to get from the start to the end in 30 minutes. Or less. Most students took all 30 minutes. Some took longer and failed. The fastest time ever was 27 minutes. That record was held by a warrior from the Karathi race. The Karathi were known for being smart fighters and good at making plans. Katie had spent the last week studying everything she could about the maze. She read reports from other students. She looked at pictures of the walls and doors. She even talked to some older students who had already passed the test. But the more she learned, the more she noticed something strange. All the reports talked about following paths and solving puzzles. They talked about finding keys and typing in codes. They talked about sneaking past guards and hiding from sensors. Nobody talked about the walls themselves. Katie had grown up on Earth. Earth was full of storms and earthquakes and wild animals. Humans had learned to build strong things that could survive when nature tried to destroy them. But they had also learned something else. They learned that even the strongest wall could be broken if you knew where to hit it. The big doors opened with a loud sound like thunder. A tall alien in a silver uniform stepped out. This was Commander Veltar, the teacher who ran the maze tests. He looked like he was made of clear crystal, and lights moved inside his body like colored water. "Students, enter the preparation chamber," Commander Veltar said. His voice sounded like music, but cold music that made Katie feel uncomfortable. Preparation chamber was a big room with white walls and bright lights. In the center was a table with tools and equipment. Each student was allowed to take one small tool with them into the maze. Most students picked computers or scanners or other high-tech gadgets. Katie picked a simple multi-tool. It had a knife, some screwdrivers, and a small hammer. The other students looked at her choice. and shook their heads. The blue alien with 4 arms laughed and said something in his own language. Katie did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. He thought she was stupid. Commander Veltar led them to another room. This one had big windows that looked down into the maze. Katie pressed her face against the glass and stared. The maze was bigger than she had expected. It was like a city made of metal corridors and rooms. The walls were thick and gray. They had pipes and wires running along them. Red lights blinked in some places. Blue lights glowed in others. She could see the starting point near the bottom. It was a small platform with a green circle painted on it. Far away, near the top, was the ending point. It was another platform with a red circle. Between them was a puzzle of walls and passages that twisted and turned in ways that hurt her head to look at. "The rules are simple," Commander Veltar announced. "Enter the maze at the green circle. Reach the red circle. You have 30 minutes. You must pass through 3 security checkpoints along the way. Each checkpoint requires you to solve a puzzle or disable a lock." He pointed at different parts of the maze. "The first checkpoint is here, in the east wing. The second is here, in the center chamber. The third is here, near the exit. Miss any checkpoint, and you fail. Take longer than 30 minutes, and you fail. Damage any equipment, and you fail." Katie listened to the rules, but she was still looking at the walls. Now that she was closer, she could see more details. The walls were made of panels that were bolted together. The bolts were strong, but they were also the weak points. If you could remove enough bolts, a whole panel might come loose. She also noticed something else. The walls had stress patterns. These were tiny lines and marks that showed where the metal was under pressure. Katie had learned to read stress patterns when she was 12 years old, after an earthquake damaged her school. Her father, who was a construction worker, had taught her how to tell which walls were safe and which ones might fall down. The maze walls had stress patterns that showed they were carrying a lot of weight. If something happened to change that weight distribution, the walls might not be as strong as they looked. "Students, take your positions." Commander Veltar ordered. Katie walked down the stairs to the starting platform. Her heart was beating even faster now. Around her, the other students were checking their equipment and reviewing their plans. The blue alien was talking to his computer in a low voice. The rock creature was scanning the walls with some kind of detector. Katie just stood there and looked at the wall in front of her. It was 3 feet thick and made of the same gray metal as the rest of the maze. There was one door in the middle, and it was closed. That door would open when the test started, and she was supposed to walk through it and begin following the corridors. But Katie was thinking about her multi-tool and about stress patterns and about what her grandmother had told her about being human. The countdown began. Commander Veltar's voice echoed through the chamber. 10.9.8. Katie took a deep breath and got ready to show these aliens what a human could do. Double quotes. 3.2. Begin. The door opened and Katie stepped into the maze. But she was not planning to follow the path that the aliens had made for her. She had a different idea. A very human idea. Katie stepped through the door and into the maze. The first corridor was long and narrow, with gray walls on both sides. Red lights blinked along the ceiling. The air smelled like metal and electricity. Behind her, she could hear the other students entering their own starting points. The maze had multiple entrances, but they all led to the same 3 checkpoints and the same exit. The idea was to make sure no student could just follow another one. Katie walked forward slowly. Her boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. The corridor stretched ahead of her for about 50 feet, then turned to the right. According to the maps she had studied, this path would lead her to a series of smaller rooms. In those rooms, she would find the first security checkpoint. But Katie was not looking ahead. She was looking at the walls beside her Dot up close. The walls were even more interesting than they had appeared from the observation window. The metal panels were held together with large bolts, just as she had thought. But she could also see where pipes and cables ran behind the panels. There were access hatches every few feet, probably for maintenance. More importantly, she could see the stress patterns more clearly. The walls were not just decoration. They were holding up the ceiling and supporting the floors above. The whole maze was like a big building, and these walls were doing important structural work. Katie stopped walking and put her hand against the wall. She could feel vibrations running through the metal. Some of the vibrations were from the maze's electrical systems. Others were from the air circulation fans. But there was something else, too. A deep, steady vibration that felt like the whole building was alive. She pulled out her multi-tool and opened the small knife. Very carefully, she scraped away some of the paint near one of the bolts. Underneath, the metal looked different. It was a lighter color and had tiny marks that Katie recognized. These walls were not as strong as they looked. The metal was good quality, but it was thin. It was designed to look tough and intimidating, but it was really just a shell around a lighter framework. Katie had seen similar construction on Earth in buildings that needed to look strong, but also needed to be built quickly and cheaply. She moved to the next bolt and scraped the paint there. Too, the same light-colored metal with the same tiny marks. This was definitely not the super-strong alien metal that the Academy probably claimed it was. Katie smiled for the first time since entering the maze. She had found her way out, but first she needed to understand exactly how the walls were put together. She walked along the corridor, examining the bolts and panels. Every 10 feet, there was a vertical support beam. These beams were definitely stronger than the panels. They were the real structure holding everything up. The panels between the beams were just filling in the spaces. If she could remove one panel, she could probably squeeze through the gap. But she needed to be careful. If she picked the wrong panel, she might cause the whole section to collapse. Katie reached the corner where the corridor turned right. She could hear sounds coming from that direction. Mechanical sounds like motors and gears. Those were probably the security systems for the first checkpoint. Instead of turning right, Katie knelt down and examined the wall more closely. This panel was perfect. It was between two support beams, so removing it would not affect the structure. It was also at a good height for her to climb through. She started with the bottom bolts. A multi-tool screwdriver fit perfectly. The bolts were tight, but not impossibly tight. Katie had strong hands from years of working on her family's farm. Her father had taught her that there was no machine that could not be taken apart if you had the right tools and enough patience. The first bolt came out after 2 minutes of work. The second bolt was easier. By the time she had removed the third bolt, the bottom of the panel was starting to sag. Above her, she could hear voices. The other students were making progress through the maze. Some of them sounded frustrated. Others sounded confident. Katie wondered how they would react when they realized what she was doing. She moved to the top bolts. These were harder to reach, but her multi-tool had an extension that helped. The fourth bolt came out with a squeak of metal. The fifth bolt was stuck at first, but Katie used the hammer part of her tool to tap it loose. When the sixth and final bolt came out, the whole panel shifted. It was heavy, probably 50 pounds of metal, but it was no longer attached to anything. Katie grabbed the edges and carefully pulled it toward her. The panel came free with a grinding sound. Behind it was a space about 3 feet wide and 6 feet tall. Katie could see pipes and cables running up and down. There was just enough room for a person to squeeze through. She set the panel aside and looked through the opening. On the other side was another corridor. This one ran parallel to the corridor she had been in, but it was not part of the official maze path. It was probably a maintenance corridor for the academy staff. Katie squeezed through the opening. It was a tight fit, but she made it. The maintenance corridor was darker than the main maze, with only a few small lights along the floor. The air was dustier and had a different smell. She turned left and started walking. According to her mental map of the maze, this direction should take her toward the center, where the second checkpoint was located. If she was right, she could bypass the first checkpoint entirely. The maintenance corridor was straight and simple. There were no puzzles or traps or security systems. There were just pipes and cables and the occasional junction box. Katie walked quickly but quietly. Her soft-soled boots made almost no sound on the dusty floor dot after about 5 minutes of walking. She found what she was looking for. Another wall panel, this one facing into the main maze near the second checkpoint. She could hear mechanical sounds on the other side, different from the sounds she had heard near the first checkpoint. Katie knelt down and began working on the bolts. This panel was identical to the first one, with the same thin metal and the same simple bolt pattern. But now she knew exactly what she was doing. The bolts came out much faster. When she pulled this panel away, she found herself looking into a large circular room. This was the maze's central chamber. In the middle of the room was a complex machine with blinking lights and moving parts. That was the second checkpoint, but Katie was not interested in the machine. She was looking at the far side of the room, where another corridor led toward the exit. Between her and that corridor was about 30 feet of open space. She squeezed through the opening and dropped quietly into the chamber. The machine in the center was making enough noise to cover any sounds she might make. She crossed the room quickly, staying close to the wall. The corridor on the far side was different from the others. It was wider and had better lighting. The walls looked thicker and stronger. This was probably the final section of the maze, where the third checkpoint and the exit were located. Katie walked down this corridor until she could see the third checkpoint ahead. It was a heavy door with multiple locks and a computer terminal. According to the rules, she needed to solve a puzzle on the computer to unlock the door. But Katie was not planning to solve any puzzles. She examined the walls around the door. These walls were definitely stronger than the others. They were made of thicker metal and had more bolts, but they still followed the same basic design. Panels between support beams with the same stress patterns she had learned to read. Katie found a panel that was far enough from the door to avoid the security sensors, but close enough to the exit area to be useful. She began working on the bolts. This panel was harder to remove. The bolts were tighter, and the metal was thicker. But Katie was getting better at this. She had developed a rhythm. Turn the screwdriver. Tap with the hammer. Check the bolt. Repeat. As she worked, she could hear alarms starting to sound in other parts of the maze. The security system had probably noticed that some of the other students were taking too long or making mistakes. But there were no alarms near Katie. The security system did not know she existed. The last bolt came out with a loud clang. Katie froze and listened. The alarms were still sounding, but they were far away. She had not been detected. She pulled a panel away and looked through the opening. On the other side was the maze's exit chamber. She could see the red circle that marked the finish line. It was only 20 feet away. Katie squeezed through the opening and dropped into the exit chamber. She landed softly and looked around. The chamber was empty, except for the finish platform and some monitoring equipment. She walked over to the red circle and stepped onto it. Immediately, lights began flashing and a loud buzzer sounded. A computer voice announced, "Cadet Martinez. Time, 2 minutes, 17 seconds. New record." Katie looked up at the observation windows where the teachers and other students were watching. She could see their shocked faces pressed against the glass. Commander Veltar was standing at the front, his crystal body flashing with colors she had never seen before. She had done it. She had broken their unbreakable maze in just over 2 minutes. And she had done it by being human. The observation deck was completely silent. Katie could see dozens of alien faces pressed against the windows above her, all staring down at her with expressions she could not read. Some looked angry. Others looked confused. A few looked scared. Commander Veltar was the first to speak. His crystal body was flashing bright red and orange colors as his voice came through the speakers in the exit chamber. "Cadet Martinez," he said, and his musical voice sounded strained. "You will remain where you are. Do not move. Do not touch anything." Katie stood on the red circle and waited. She was not afraid. She had followed the rules as they were given. To her, get from the start to the finish in 30 minutes or less. Pass through the security checkpoints. She had done both of those things, just not in the way anyone expected. Heavy footsteps echoed through the maze as security guards rushed toward the exit chamber. Katie could hear them talking in several different alien languages. Most of the words she did not understand, but the tone was clear. They were upset. The first guard to reach her was a big creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a robot. His body was covered in brown fur, but his arms and legs were made of metal. His eyes glowed blue as he scanned Katie from head to toe. "She is not armed," the guard reported. "No weapons detected, no dangerous materials." More guards arrived. There was the blue alien with 4 arms that Katie had seen in the waiting room. There was a floating creature that looked like a jellyfish made of light. There was something that might have been a plant, but it had eyes and moved like an animal. Behind the guards came Commander Veltar himself. Up close, he was even more impressive than he had looked from a distance. He was 8 feet tall, and his crystal body contained swirling patterns of colored light that moved like slow lightning. "Cadet Martinez," he said, looking down at her, "you were instructed to follow the designated pathway through the maze. You were instructed to solve the puzzles at each checkpoint. You were instructed not to damage any equipment." Katie looked up at him. "Yes, sir. I understand those were the instructions." "Then why," Commander Veltar continued, his voice getting louder, "did you ignore those instructions? Why did you remove wall panels? Why did you bypass the security checkpoints? Why did you treat this facility like ... like..." He seemed to be struggling to find the right words. Katie helped him. "Like a problem to be solved instead of a test to be passed," she suggested. The commander's colors shifted to deep purple. "Exactly. This maze has been used to test cadets for over 50 years. Thousands of students from dozens of species have completed this challenge. All of them followed the rules. All of them showed respect for the facility and the process." Katie nodded. "I am sure they did, sir. But the rules you gave me were simple. Reach the exit in 30 minutes or less. Pass through the security checkpoints. I did both of those things. You did not pass through the checkpoints." Commander Veltar's voice was almost a shout now. "You went around them." "With respect, sir," Katie said calmly, "I did pass through them. I entered the first checkpoint area, observed the security system, and determined that it was not necessary to interact with it. I passed through the second checkpoint area in the same way. I approached the third checkpoint and determined that the most efficient solution was to bypass its security system." The blue 4-armed alien stepped forward. "This is not how civilized beings behave," he said in accented English. "You have damaged Academy property. You have shown disrespect for our traditions. You have acted like a savage." Katie felt her face get hot. She had heard that word before. Savage. It was what many aliens called humans behind their backs. It was what they called any species that solved problems with physical action instead of careful planning and technology. I solved the problem I was given, she said, her voice still calm, but with an edge to it now. I was told to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. I found the fastest way to do that. By breaking things. The blue alien's 4 arms were waving in agitation. By destroying carefully designed systems. By acting like a primitive beast. Now Katie was getting angry. She could feel her heart rate increasing and her muscles tensing. This was a human response to being threatened, and she knew the aliens could probably sense it. Good. Let them see what a human looked like when she was ready to fight. But before Katie could respond, another voice joined the conversation. This voice was speaking English with an accent Katie recognized immediately. It was a human accent, an American accent like her own. That's enough. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. He was a tall man in his 50s, wearing the uniform of a high-ranking academy officer. His hair was gray, and his face was lined with scars, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. Katie had seen his picture in the Academy's information packets. This was Admiral Rodriguez, the highest-ranking human in the Galactic Fleet. Admiral Rodriguez walked over to examine the holes Katie had made in the walls. He knelt down and looked at the removed panels, running his fingers along the bolt holes, and examining the metal. Interesting technique, he said, standing up and brushing dust off his hands. Clean removal, minimal structural damage, precise targeting of non-load-bearing sections. He looked at Katie with something that might have been approval. Where did you learn to do this? My father is a construction worker, sir, Katie replied. He taught me how buildings are put together and how to take them apart safely. And you applied that knowledge to this situation because... Katie thought about how to explain it. Because that's what humans do, sir. We look at problems and we find solutions. Sometimes the solution is to follow the path that someone else made. Sometimes the solution is to make a new path. Admiral Rodriguez nodded slowly. He turned to face Commander Veltar. Commander, I think we need to have a discussion about this test and what it's really measuring. The crystal alien's colors shifted. Again, cycling through shades of blue and green. Admiral, with all due respect, this cadet has violated the spirit of the challenge. The maze is designed to test strategic thinking, problem-solving skills, and the ability to work within established parameters. Is it? Admiral Rodriguez asked. Or is it designed to test whether students can think like the species that built it? He gestured toward the holes in the walls. Every species in the Academy has their own way of approaching problems. The Zephyrians use energy manipulation. The Korathi use strategic planning. The Nexari use technological integration. But humans? Humans use whatever works. Commander Veltar's colors were shifting rapidly now. But there must be rules. There must be order. Without structure, we have chaos. Structure is important. Admiral Rodriguez agreed. But so is adaptability. So is creative thinking. So is the ability to see problems from a completely different perspective. He walked over to stand beside Katie. This cadet looked at your maze and saw something that none of your other students saw. She saw that the walls were not barriers to be overcome, but obstacles to be removed. She found the weak points in your design and exploited them efficiently. The blue 4-armed alien made a sound of disgust. It is still savage behavior, destroying property instead of using intelligence. Admiral Rodriguez turned to look at him. Is it? Let me ask you something. If you were trapped in a burning building, would you rather have a rescue team that followed proper procedures and filled out the right forms? Or would you rather have a rescue team that kicked down the door and got you out alive? The alien did not answer. The universe is full of burning buildings, Admiral Rodriguez continued. Pirates who do not follow the rules of civilized warfare. natural disasters that do not care about proper protocols, enemy forces that use weapons and tactics that your textbooks never covered. He looked around at all the assembled aliens. Humans have something that many species lack. We have the ability to look at any situation and ask not, what is the right way to handle this? But what is the way that works? Katie felt a surge of pride. The Admiral was defending not just her, but all of humanity. He was explaining why. Humans were valuable members of the galactic community, even though they were different from everyone else. Commander, Veltar's colors had settled into a steady pattern of yellow and orange. Katie was beginning to understand that these colors indicated deep thought. Admiral, the commander said finally, if we allow this precedent, every future cadet might attempt similar. Creative solutions. Admiral Rodriguez smiled. Good. Maybe it's time this test got a little more challenging. The argument continued for another 10 minutes. Katie stood quietly on the red circle, while aliens and humans debated around her. Some of the teachers thought she should be punished for breaking the rules. Others thought she should be rewarded for creative thinking. A few seemed to think she should be studied like a scientific specimen. Finally, Commander Veltar called for silence. His crystal body had settled into a steady blue glow, which Katie was learning meant he had made a decision. Cadet Martinez, he said, your completion time will be recorded as the new maze record. However, there will be an investigation into your methods. You will report to my office tomorrow morning for a full debriefing. Katie nodded. Yes, sir. Furthermore, the commander continued, the maze will be modified to prevent similar innovations in the future. Additional security measures will be installed. Admiral Rodriguez stepped forward. Commander, with respect, I do not think that is the right approach. Admiral? Instead of making the maze harder to break, perhaps, you should make it more realistic. Real combat situations do not have rules that prevent creative solutions. Real emergencies do not care about following proper procedures. The commander's colors shifted to purple again. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that this cadet has shown you a weakness in your training program. Instead of covering up that weakness, you should learn from it. Katie watched the conversation with growing interest. She was beginning to understand that this was about more than just her performance on the test. This was about how humans fit into the larger galactic community. The blue four-armed alien who had called her a savage spoke up again. Even if we accept that this approach has some merit, it sets a dangerous example. What happens when human cadets start breaking equipment in other classes? What happens when they decide that the rules do not apply to them? What happens, Admiral Rodriguez replied, is that they learn to think for themselves instead of just following orders blindly. He turned to address the entire group of teachers and guards. Let me tell you about the Battle of Kepler Station. 5 years ago, a human patrol ship encountered a pirate fleet that was using a new type of weapon. The pirates had created a device that could disable our ship's computer systems from a distance. Katie had heard about this battle. It was famous among human military families. The human captain, Lisa Thompson, found herself in command of a ship with no computers, no navigation, no weapons control. According to all military protocols, she should have surrendered or tried to retreat. Admiral Rodriguez smiled. Instead, she ordered her crew to manually aim the ship's main gun using visual targeting. She flew the ship by looking out the windows and judging distances by eye. She defeated the entire pirate fleet using techniques that had not been used in space. Combat for over 100 years. The aliens were listening intently now. Even the blue four-armed one had stopped waving his arms. After the battle, the Galactic Defense Force studied Captain Thompson's tactics. They discovered that she had accomplished something that the most advanced computer systems could not do. She had adapted to a completely new type of threat in real time. Commander Veltar's colors were cycling through different patterns. That is an interesting example, Admiral. But this is a training facility, not a battlefield. Is it? Admiral Rodriguez asked. Or is it a place where we prepare cadets for situations we cannot predict? He gestured toward Katie. This cadet looked at your maze and saw possibilities that your designers missed. She found solutions that your computer models did not account for. She demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking that saved Lisa Thompson's ship and crew. Katie felt a warm feeling in her chest. The Admiral was comparing her to a famous war hero. More importantly, he was explaining why her approach was not just acceptable, but valuable. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of more officials. A group of senior teachers and administrators entered the exit chamber, led by the Academy's superintendent. This was a tall, thin alien with silver skin and large black eyes. Katie had seen him during the orientation ceremony, but had never spoken to him. I have been monitoring this discussion, the superintendent said, in a voice that sounded like wind through metal pipes. The situation is ... unprecedented. Commander Veltar straightened to attention. Superintendent, I was just explaining to Admiral Rodriguez that modifications to the maze will prevent future incidents. No, the superintendent said, surprising everyone. There will be no modifications. Sir, I have reviewed Cadet Martinez's performance. I have also reviewed the Academy's mission statement and training objectives. The superintendent's large eyes fixed on Katie. The purpose of this institution is to prepare cadets for the realities of galactic service. Those realities include unexpected situations, resource limitations, and the need for creative problem-solving. He turned to address the entire group. Cadet Martinez demonstrated all of these qualities. She identified a problem, analyzed the available resources, and implemented an effective solution. The fact that her solution was unconventional does not make it wrong. The blue four-armed alien made one last attempt to argue, but she damaged Academy property. She ignored established procedures. She showed disrespect for authority. The superintendent's expression did not change, but Katie could sense that he was not impressed by these arguments. Did she? The superintendent asked. Let us examine the facts. The cadet was given a specific objective. Reach the exit within 30 minutes. She accomplished that objective in less than 10% of the allotted time. She was told to pass through 3 security checkpoints. She did so, albeit by a route that was not anticipated. He paused, looking at each of the teachers in turn. As for property damage, maintenance crews have already examined the removed panels. They can be reinstalled within 1 hour. The total cost of repairs is approximately 50 credits. Katie tried not to smile. 50 credits was less than the cost of a meal in the Academy cafeteria. Furthermore, the superintendent continued, the cadets' actions have revealed important information about the maze's security systems. We now know that the facility has vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hostile forces. This information is valuable for our defense planning. Commander Veltar's colors had faded to a dull gray. Katie was beginning to understand that this color indicated resignation or defeat. What are your orders, Superintendent? The commander asked. Cadet Martinez will receive full credit for completing the maze challenge. Her time will be recorded as the new facility record. Her methods will be studied and incorporated into future training scenarios. The superintendent looked directly at Katie. Cadet, your performance today has been exemplary. You have demonstrated the kind of innovative thinking that the galaxy needs. Continue to develop these skills. Thank you, sir, Katie replied, not quite believing what she was hearing. However, the superintendent added, you will also report to Commander Veltar tomorrow morning. Not for punishment, but for consultation. The commander will want to understand Your thought process so that he can improve the training program. Katie nodded. Yes, sir. As the officials began to disperse, Admiral Rodriguez approached Katie. Walk with me, cadet, he said quietly. They left the exit chamber and walked through the Academy's main corridors. Katie noticed that other students were staring at her as they passed. Word of her performance had apparently spread quickly. You did well today, the Admiral said. But I want you to understand something important. What is that, sir? What you accomplished today was not just about being clever or being strong. It was about being human. You looked at a problem that thousands of other students had approached in the same way, and you found a completely different solution. They stopped at a window that looked out over the Academy's main courtyard. In the distance, Katie could see the purple sky and red grass of this alien world. That ability, Admiral Rodriguez continued, is why humans are valuable members of the galactic community. Not because we are stronger or smarter than other species, but because we think differently. We see possibilities that others miss. Katie felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility. I understand, sir. Good, because tomorrow you will face new challenges. Some of them will be academic. Others will be social. The other cadets will have heard about what you did today. Some will admire you. Others will resent you. A few will try to copy your methods. What should I do? Admiral Rodriguez smiled. Be yourself. Be human. And remember that sometimes the best solution is the one that nobody else has thought of. The next morning, Katie woke up in her small dormitory room feeling different. Word of her May's performance had spread through the entire academy overnight. When she walked to breakfast, conversation stopped as she passed. Some students pointed at her and whispered. Others nodded with what looked like respect. The academy cafeteria was a huge room with tables, designed for dozens of different alien body types. Katie had always felt small there, surrounded by creatures that were taller, stronger, or more impressive than she was. But today, something had changed. Today, she felt like she belonged. She got her breakfast, a protein bar, and some fruit juice that tasted almost like orange juice from Earth, and looked for a place to sit. Usually, she sat alone or with a few other human cadets. But as she scanned the room, she saw the blue four-armed alien from yesterday waving at her. Katie walked over to his table, curious. Up close, she could see that his skin was actually covered in tiny scales that reflected the light. His 4 eyes were arranged in pairs, giving him a wider field of vision than humans had. I am Crix, he said as she sat down. I want to apologize for what I said yesterday. Calling you a savage was wrong. Katie was surprised. Thank you. I accept your apology. I have been thinking about what you did, Crix continued. On my home world, we have a saying. The river that flows around the mountain reaches the sea faster than the river that tries to flow through it. I think I understand now what that means. Other students at the table were listening to the conversation. There was the rock-like creature Katie had seen before, whose name was apparently Boulder. There was a small furry alien that looked like a cross between a cat and a bird. There was something that might have been a plant with consciousness. Your method was not savage, Boulder said in a voice that sounded like gravel falling down a hill. It was efficient. My people value efficiency above all else. The catbird creature chirped in agreement. On Feli's Prime, we have always known that the shortest distance between 2 points is not always a straight line. Sometimes you must dig under the obstacle instead of climbing over it. Katie realized that these aliens were not just being polite. They were genuinely interested in her approach. They wanted to understand how she had thought about the problem. Can you explain how you knew where to break the walls? The plant creature asked in a voice like rustling leaves. My sensors detected the structural weakness, but I did not understand its significance. Katie spent the next 20 minutes explaining stress patterns and load-bearing structures. She talked about how buildings were designed and how they could be safely dismantled. The aliens listened intently, asking questions about concepts that were obvious to any human, but completely foreign to species that had evolved on more stable worlds. When breakfast was over, Katie walked to Commander Veltar's office. The commander was waiting for her, along with several other teachers and a recording device. "Cadet Martinez," Commander Veltar said, "please sit down. We want to understand exactly how you approached yesterday's challenge." For the next 2 hours, Katie explained her thought process step by step. She described how she had studied the maze beforehand, looking for information that other students had missed. She explained how her Earth background had taught her to see structural weaknesses. She demonstrated the techniques she had used to remove the wall panels safely. The teachers asked many questions. Some wanted to know about human construction methods. Others were interested in the tools Katie had used. A few seemed concerned about security implications. "If one cadet can bypass our security system so easily," one teacher asked, "what does that say about the Academy's defenses?" Commander Veltar's colors shifted to thoughtful yellow. "It says that we have been thinking about security in only one way. We have prepared for threats from species that think like us. We have not prepared for threats from species that think like humans." After the interview, Katie attended her regular classes. Advanced Mathematics with Professor Quinn, a floating brain in a glass sphere. Galactic History with Dr. Vex, an insect-like creature with compound eyes. Combat Theory with Instructor Zara, a warrior woman from a high-gravity world dot in each class. The teachers asked her questions about her maze performance. They wanted to understand not just what she had done, but why she had thought to do it. Katie found herself explaining human psychology and problem-solving methods to creatures that had never encountered such approaches before. The most interesting class was Xenopsychology, the study of how different species think and behave. Professor Mint, who looked like a walking tree with silver bark, asked Katie to speak to the entire class about human cognitive patterns. Humans, Katie explained to her fellow students, evolved on a world where survival required constant adaptation. Our planet has earthquakes, storms, fires, floods, and dozens of other natural disasters. We learned to be flexible because rigidity meant death. A student from the peaceful water world of Aquatica raised a tentacle. But how does this flexibility help in civilized situations? Surely following established procedures is more efficient than constantly inventing new methods? Katie thought about this question carefully. Both approaches have value. Following procedures is efficient when the situation matches what the procedures were designed for. But when the situation is new or unexpected, flexibility becomes more important than efficiency. Professor Mint's bark rustled approvingly. "Can you give us an example?" Katie smiled. "Yesterday's maze test. The procedures worked fine for students whose species had helped design the test, but they did not work as well for a species that thinks differently about physical obstacles." After classes, Katie returned to her dormitory to find a message waiting. For her, it was from her grandmother on Earth, who had somehow already heard about her performance. "Katie," the message said, "I am so proud of you. You did exactly what I hoped you would do. You stayed human in a place that wanted you to be something else. Remember this feeling. Remember that being different is not wrong. It is just different. And sometimes, different is exactly what the universe needs." That evening, Katie joined a study group with several other cadets. They were preparing for a test on interstellar navigation. As they worked through practice problems, Katie noticed that her fellow students were starting to ask her opinion on solutions. What would a human do in this situation? Cricks asked when they encountered a particularly difficult scenario. Katie looked at the problem, a navigation challenge involving multiple gravity wells and time constraints. The traditional solution involved complex mathematical calculations and careful route planning. A human would probably look for shortcuts, she said after thinking about it. We would ask if there are any gravity wells that could be used to slingshot the ship faster instead of just avoid it. The other students worked through this approach and discovered that it reduced travel time by 30%. Boulder made his gravelly sound of approval. Efficiency through unconventional thinking. As the weeks passed, Katie found that her reputation continued to grow. Other students sought her out for advice on challenging problems. Teachers began incorporating alternative approaches into their lesson plans. The Academy's training scenarios were modified to include situations that required creative solutions. But the most important change was in how Katie saw herself. She was no longer the scared girl who had stood in front of the maze doors, worried about representing her entire species. She was a problem solver, a bridge between human thinking and alien logic, a proof that diversity made the galactic community stronger. 3 months after the maze incident, Katie received another message. This one was from Admiral Rodriguez, Cadet. Martinez, the message read, "Your performance continues to exceed expectations. I am pleased to inform you that you have been selected for advanced training in tactical innovation. Upon graduation, you will be assigned to the Galactic Fleet's Special Operations Division, where your unique problem-solving skills will be put to their best use." Katie smiled as she read the message. She thought about her grandmother's advice, about staying human in an alien world. She thought about the walls she had broken and the rules she had bent. She thought about all the problems she would face in the future and all the creative solutions she had yet to discover. The maze had been designed to test her limits. Instead, it had taught her that humans did not have limits. They had different ways of thinking about what limits meant. She was ready for whatever challenges the universe might throw at her. After all, she was human, and humans always found a way.